Inexplicable leak.
Warning, incoming debris is beyond station capacity. Structural collapse imminent. Seek immediate evacuation. Warning, incoming debris is beyond station capacity. Structural collapse imminent. Seek immediate evacuation. Warning.
Araxi watched the broadcast as the bar fell silent, even as he muted the alert. Then the lights went dim and began flashing as they pointed a path to the escape modules. No one bothered to follow them. The pods were mostly wrecked by vagrants and filled with the refuse of 1,000 species that couldn't find a toilet. Death was preferable. He swiped at the bar counter absent-mindedly even as he heard his boss slam down the locks to the office. He was used to that now. It was his employer's response to anything that he feared might cost him money. He came to a decision. All right, all drinks are now on the tab. The last one into paradise pays the bill. He figured that would keep his people busy while the world ended. He also poured himself an isky, a large enough measure to keep him warm when the station was ripped open to the naked vacuum of space. He raised his glass to loudly curse the lowest bidder and second cousin of whoever had built the deflectors. May we meet them in the cold and carry a flamethrower to warm them. His customers seemed to agree. Except for two of them. His humans had watched the broadcast with the same surprise as everyone else, but then had huddled together and urgently spoken. Araxi had no idea of what they found to talk about when the station was about to be cut into shreds and fall into the sun, but you never knew with humans. Maybe they had a ship stashed somewhere. He watched them leave without a nod or a farewell, and that hurt him more than he expected. He went to take another drink only to find the glass was inexplicably empty. He filled it a little more this time, in case it had sprung a leak. A short, sharp shower of shit. That's what they called it. At least that's what the rescuers would call it afterwards. The universe throwing dirty snowballs around with no notice and nothing between you and them but some low-bid steel and all the oxygen you could eat. The supposed deflectors failed, and anti-collision plasma bounced off them like the cheap children's toys they were. The two humans had no superpowers. They had no solution that didn't involve a whole lot of shit that wasn't here right now. But they had an idea and a couple of keycards. Tom looked at the door and glanced at his accomplice. Either he shoots us or saves us. He won't forgive us, though. Ready? Whatever hesitation had held them back was shaken by the echo of debris hitting the station. Bill Notary, senior salesman and avid historian, began banging on the door. The man who opened the door looked old. Gandalf old, not even human old anymore. The two men stood back and waited. The man listened as the orbital echoed with the sound of striking meteors and grunted, "Really? You woke me up for this?" He began closing the door in their faces. Bill spoke up. "I call you to service, Iron Man. You live so that others may laugh, that others may love. You are the price we paid. Serve us now so that others can live." He hoped he had remembered the words correctly. He stopped and waited. The Iron Men hadn't been called to war in decades, and they were allowed to say no. To refuse to serve was death for them, but sometimes death is the easier option. The door stopped closing, and the shadowed face seemed to add years as dark green eyes focused on him. You? You call me to service? There is a price for that." Ted spoke up from behind Bill. "Aye, and I'll carry my share. My life for the orbital. I can't do it, and—" He nodded at Bill. "Neither can he. You can try." The elderly man seemed to stop. "My service for yours. I'll need access to the mainframe and 2 bottles of decent isky." Bill fumbled for his keycard. "That will give you access to anything on the orbital. It's locked to my bio, but the thing is too stupid to tell one human from another. Why do you need the isky?" The Iron Man just looked at him and listened as the orbital began to ring from the impacts. Ted was already running to his apartment to grab the drink. In his haste, he pulled the 2 finest examples that he owned as he counted the seconds. What felt like forever was less than 5 minutes. His body seemed to think he had climbed a mountain as he passed over the bottles. The Iron Man grunted and then slowly nodded. "You have decent taste at least. You'd better come in. I'll link from here. I have better gear than the trash this place uses." The room was surprisingly human, decked out in quality furniture and bright colors with houseplants adding a lot of green. The Iron Man snorted loudly at the surprise of his 2 guests. "Really? They didn't teach you enough. I am not some monster from your fairy tales. I am just the logical conclusion to the human race. He bit out the cork from one of the bottles and took a sip. At least I don't have to kill anyone this time. He waved to a couple of armchairs. Sit. The console was impressive, a collection of xenotech that had been hammered together by someone with a ruthless appreciation of machines and absolutely no interest in looks. The Iron Man pulled out a couple of cables and pushed them into his wrist. He looked back at his guests. So basics rules are don't interfere. Don't touch me or the console until I tell you can. Keep your seats in the upright position and observe the seatbelt signs. He was grinning as he added, There are no emergency exits, so if this doesn't work, you're fucked. He turned back to the console and closed his eyes. He studied the data as it streamed in, noting that by his personal measure, the orbital was probably fucked. Over 40% of the defenses had already failed. Damage to the exterior was building towards critical, and there was a metric fuckton of rocks incoming. His implants insisted on reading it as an attack, but he felt it was closer to a wrong time/wrong place issue. He scanned the available assets, even the hidden ones, and concluded that the place was indeed fucked. Within an hour, it would be an expanding sphere of debris, and he would be the last one standing. Again. Well, since he couldn't stop the rocks, he simply needed to get out of the way. Using the orbital boosters would get him nowhere. They were designed to gently drift the station and to keep the orbit stable. Exactly the wrong thing he needed right now. New plan. He started by squashing the stupid AI that was managing the situation. It was a waste of sand. He took control of the broadcast system and began telling the inhabitants to move into the center of the orbital. Then he started evacuating the atmosphere from anywhere he really didn't want people. He watched as they began to take the hint and head inwards. As they began to move, he cut the power behind them and sealed up the doors. He put on some ominous music and hummed along, even cutting out the streetlights behind the stragglers like a bad horror vid. Bill and Ted just sat there and waited as the Iron Man took over the orbital. They held tightly to their chairs as the weird music filled the room. What the fuck is he doing? Was all Bill could think to ask. Ted just shrugged. Trying to keep us alive? If he was that pissed, we would have never made it past the door. The Iron Man had excellent hearing and turned to the two men. You're not wrong, but you are going to hate my solution. That means everyone else will hate it, and that means I have to move. Again. I wish you fuckers would sort this shit out yourselves. He nodded to them. I wasn't joking about the seatbelts. Things are about to get messy. They discovered what he meant as the gravity began to fail. It started with the fun bit, the weightlessness, and then moved swiftly into motion sickness and nausea. Ted felt it first. Shit, I need a bucket. What the hell is going on? His face was getting paler as he spoke. The humming paused for a moment. Puke wherever you want, we're not going to be around to clean up. I just cut the grav and I'm dropping us towards the sun. Hold on tight, I'm about to blow the engines and accelerate. Some of the inhabitants had suddenly decided that the smell of piss was a price worth paying, and the last of the working escape pods flew safely away. A few were trapped in the many broken ones, left cursing and swearing at the orbital management. The engines blew. He had set them up to blow in pairs so that he could at least try and aim the orbital towards safety. He tracked the stars and timed it as well as he could, but he wasn't a spacer. He had been a grunt, an on-the-ground murder machine. A soldier, not a black sky sailor. Still, his implants knew the basics, and it seemed to work. He went back to the public broadcast and let them know what was happening. Probably should have done that before, but fuck it. He wasn't public relations. Attention all. We are currently leaving orbit in order to avoid the incoming debris. Hold on to something. He sat back and pulled out the connections to the console. His mass and abilities meant he could ignore the gravity issues, so he simply pushed himself away and began picking up papers and trinkets from the desk. Ted tried to avoid the mess he had just made and called out, "So what did you do?" The Iron Man continued to collect up his gear. "I dropped us into the sun. Should take a while if you want to collect anything nearby. There's grav gear in the hallway. Help yourself." Bill unhooked himself from his chair. "What? Why would you do that? It just means we are all going to die by burning, the Iron Man grunted as he filled a bag. I changed the problem. Now ships will have time to reach you, maybe rescue most of the population. It seemed better than sitting around getting blown up by snowballs. You might want to get to an airlock before the crowds arrive. Bill held himself level. And you? What are you going to do? The Iron Man grinned briefly. I'll find my own way out, thanks. Best of luck. Consider yourself served. It didn't take him long to reach his ship. In reality, it took him longer to pry the doors open. They obviously hadn't enjoyed 50 years of inaction and had chosen today to make the point. Since he reckoned he would never need them again, he simply punched out the lock. It was tiny, probably the smallest ship ever allowed into space. He didn't need atmosphere. He didn't need an AI or food or a toilet. He didn't need anything except an engine and a place to sit. He had fitted some decent deflectors onto the craft, mostly so that he could sleep. Sort of. He dreamed of dreaming again, a skill lost to the tech that filled him. But he had learned to reduce the power and allow himself to fall into a sort of daze that seemed almost the same when he closed his eyes. As he launched, his console beeped at him. The snowballs were trying to find the orbital. Therefore, they were not accidental. Therefore, they were a weapon. Therefore, he must continue to serve. Shit. He opened the second bottle of whiskey and took a deep drink. Then he aimed the ship towards the triangulated source of the debris that had decided that it was clever enough to change direction. He figured that he would just kill everyone involved and move on. He was beginning to regret leaving his houseplants behind. They were difficult to find and hard to raise.